Robert Lewis has been a pastor, writer, speaker, and visionary for over 40 years. Robert founded the original men's fraternity and developed the men's fraternity curriculum in 1990 while serving as a teaching pastor at Fellowship Bible College in Little Rock, Arkansas. Robert was named Pastor of the Year by the National Coalition of Men's Ministry in recognition for his efforts to help men discover authentic manhood. The original men's fraternity curriculum has impacted more than 1 million men worldwide in churches, college campuses, corporate boardrooms, and prisons. In addition to developing the men's fraternity curriculum, he has authored many publications, including Raising a Modern Day Knight and Better Man. Today, Robert is still involved in local church ministry and serves on several nonprofit boards. Married since 1971, Robert and Sherrard Lewis reside in Little Rock and have 4 grown children and 3 grandchildren. Please welcome to the stage Robert Lewis.
If you guys don't mind, I'm going to use this because it helps me a little bit with my eyesight. I want to make one correction to my introduction. My wife and I have been married as of this year 50 years. 50 years. Yeah. And we don't have 3 grandchildren, we have 10 grandchildren. And I tell you, they fill up the house a lot. They really do. So, guys, we've had a good time this morning, haven't we? It's been really good. And I thought I would start out telling you, as I listened to Anthony, and of course last night I was with Clark and those guys, when you're around these great athletes, wouldn't you love to have an introduction like that? Where you're told about being all-pro, #1 draft choice, those kind of things. I'm just glad I played on my high school team, okay? So, but I'm just delighted to be here. It's so great to be back in Oregon. I lived in Oregon in the 70s. I was here for 4 years. I have 4 wonderful years of memories here. Part of that was going to Lewis and Clark College. Any graduates of Lewis and Clark here? Some of that was going to Western Seminary, 4 years of there. I had the opportunity of having my first child at Kaiser Permanente Hospital. So we have an Oregonian in our family. I had a great stint coaching high school football in Portland. I loved that while I was in seminary. It was kind of a great release. And then I loved traveling around your great state. I mean, the beauty of Oregon is absolutely outstanding. And when I think about Oregon the most, the thing that comes to my mind the most is when I was working on the west side of the Willamette River. At the end of the day, I'd be driving back to Portland, and as I came into Portland, you kind of start going down the hill a little bit, and there's the city of Portland below you. But the greatest memory of all was I would look up, and towering above that skyline was Mount Hood. For 4 years, I never stopped saying, wow, what a mountain. And it was so good to even come back and be driving down to Salem and see Mount Hood again. It's such a majestic mountain. And I would look at it during the years I was in school here, and I would say to myself, because I'm a lowlander from Louisiana, I climbed out of the swamps. But when I would look at that mountain, I would have a couple of questions that would immediately come to my mind. I would say, I wonder what it would be like to climb a mountain like that. And then I would say, but I wonder what it would be like to stand on the peak of that mountain. Because, if you look at any mountain, it has kind of a romantic lure to it. It's kind of like it's calling you to go to the top. Well, about 25 years later, we were hosting a national church conference at our church. And I was one of the speakers, and I was talking about setting goals and dreaming big, and I kind of got off to the side about bucket list, and I was sharing with the audience some of my thoughts on having a bucket list as I got older. And I mentioned in that talk that I would love to climb a mountain. I was kind of flashing back to Mount Hood. And I said, but I don't want it to be a hill. I want it to be a real mountain. And when the talk was over, one of the participants in our conference came down. I'd never met him before. And he came down and he said, you really want to do that? And at the time, I'd kind of lost track of what I'd said. I said, well, do what? He said, do you really want to climb a real mountain? And I said, well, yeah. And he said, well, I'm a Exum mountain guide from Jackson Hole, Wyoming. And if you don't know anything about Exum, it's one of the elite premier mountaineering companies in all of America. And he was visiting from Jackson Hole, and he said, if you want to, I'll take you mountain climbing this summer. Well, to make a long story short, we stayed in contact, and he invited me out to Jackson Hole, invited my son out. By the way, we got to be really good friends after this moment, and we've stayed good friends, and we've actually created some things together, a father-son adventure camp, and now he's actually working with me with the Better Man Ministry. He's in the back of the auditorium. I don't know if you can see Russell, but he'll raise his hand. But he'll be manning the Better Man booth. But we got to be good friends. But that first summer, Mason, my 14-year-old, and I, we went out to Jackson Hole, and we got a little bit of training, not much, for Russell, and then we took off to climb a mountain. So I remember when I saw it, it was eye-popping. But here's the mountain that we climbed. Now remember, I've hardly been over a big hill. And we go out there, and this is one of the Teton Peaks. It's about 12,000 feet high. And I looked at that and I went, that's a real mountain. And it was going to be a 2-day climb. So we started out the first day, it was, the long grind of just hiking up to get above the timberline, and we did that. Spent the whole day doing that, but when we finally got there, we put a little base camp there next to an ice lake, and there was, a big rock wall there, and the summit was up above, but we camped out, spent the night. Russell got us up early, about 4 a.m. the next day, and in the dark, we climbed that sheer rock wall to get to a little ledge that we can begin to work our way towards the summit. And we were roped up together, and there we are, scaling this mountain. And I had 2 great experiences emotionally as we went up that mountain. The first was, this climb is absolutely thrilling. It's thrilling. I mean, thrilling because of the grandeur of the perspective. And I don't know if you guys have been on a mountain, but as we got up 8,000, 9,000 feet, when you're walking along that ridge line and you just feel like there's just open air all around you, you literally have the sensation that you're flying. And it was thrilling, and the grandeur was just beautiful. But the second emotion I had as we went up was, this mountain climb is also terrifying. It's terrifying. In fact, one particular moment stands out even to this day for me. It was as we were getting close, we were about an hour out from the summit, and suddenly we come on our path to that dead end on this ridge line, and you can't go any further. The only way forward was to go out on just a narrow ledge. It was an open air, 2,000-foot drop ledge that you had to climb out on for about 8 yards to get to the other side. Now, if you want something to think about, then think about, Cliffhanger with Sylvester Stallone. That's what it felt like to me. I mean, it's just open air. And you could think of it as putting 2 Empire State Buildings together on top of one another, and you're at the very top of the second one, and you're climbing out an office window, and yet the little ledge to the next office is all broken up, and you're supposed to go across that like this to get to the other side. And I was absolutely terrified. And so was my son. Now, Russell, being the mountain climber, he made it across fairly easy. And then he called out to us on the other side. He said, "You can step out. I've got you." Right. You're thinking, there's just no way. But if you want to get to the summit, that was the only way that we could get there. And so Mason was belayed up to Russell, and I was behind him, so Mason would be the next one out. And Mason said at this moment, he turned to me with his eyes as big as saucers and made a statement that is, even to this day, one of the great memories. He looked at me and he went, "Dad, this is madness." And you know what? That's exactly what it was. It was madness. And you know, in life, I have found there are a lot of madness moments for men. We've even heard some of those with Mark and with Anthony. There are madness moments. And maybe some of you guys are in a madness moment right now. And I mean, as when I say a madness moment, I mean when you're in a moment where something is being offered to you that's bigger and better and maybe even more fulfilling, and it's just up ahead and you know it's there, and yet where you are to make that move to go for those things is at great risk. You might even could lose it all and fail. And you've got all these voices that are inside your head screaming at you. At the same time, voices are saying, "You can't do this. It's too hard. You could get hurt. You need to back up. Play it safe. Don't take this risk." And yet there's another voice inside of you saying, "You can do that. And imagine if you do, what it will be like when you get on the other side." And so you're sitting there in that madness moment trying to decide what you want to do. Because madness moments, guys, are what I call life-defining moments, where you either courageously go forward for more, or you choose to stop, back down, play it safe, and settle for less. Author Ryan Holiday captures a madness moment when he writes this in his book. He said, "We are all here for such a brief time on this planet as a man. How do you want to spend it? If fear is to be the driving force in your life, then fear what you'll miss. Fear what happens if you don't act. Fear what they'll think of you down the road for having dared so little. Think of what you're leaving on the table. Think of the terrifying cost of playing it small." Wow. In this madness moment on the mountain for Mason and I, all that was going on in our head, and we were being asked, do you want more of the mountain? Or do you want to stop here, as many have, and have less? There we were, and suddenly I noticed Mason had actually gotten up and stepped out on that broken ledge, grabbing for those few little handholds of rocks that were across that open air face cliff, 2,000 feet straight down. And he made it to the other side, and I was so glad. I mean, that's my son. But then it's my turn. And because of my son's courage, that's what I'll have to say, somehow I stepped out and made it too. Got to the other side. And of course, we were thrilled that we made it. But the real thrill was not in that moment. It was what was to come in a few more moments. When, after about 45 more minutes, we were standing on the peak, the 12,000-foot peak of Buck Mountain, one of the Tetons, standing there, hugging each other on that top. Russell, Mason, and I, high-fiving one another, chest bumping. I mean, we were world champions at that moment. We had done it. We had conquered the mountain, and it was amazing. And to think what I would have missed by playing it small. This is a manhood journey. And the madness of the moment, in that moment, had turned to glory. because on top it was breathtaking. The beauty of it was so deeply satisfying. But as we were leaving, I thought to myself, no longer would I ever look at a mountain again the same way. No longer would I look at Mount Hood, even as I passed it, coming in from the airport and think this. I wonder what it's like to climb a mountain like that. I wonder what it would be like to stand on the peak of that mountain. Guys, I don't think that anymore because I did it. I was there. Now, why do I share that with you, that story? Because that story has a comparison to another story, your story, a spiritual story. Because climbing a physical mountain has a lot in common for us men in climbing a spiritual mountain that we're all going to be asked to climb. And that mountain is the mountain that I call Mount Christianity. And they have some common similarities between the two. For instance, both climbs of both mountains, the physical and the spiritual, they both begin with a call to commitment. Remember Russell asking me the question, do you really want to climb a real mountain? And I had to decide if I did. It's the same with climbing Mount Christianity. Nothing begins in that climb either without you saying, yes, I'm ready to believe and follow Jesus Christ. I'm ready to give my life to Him. And I hope that before this day is over, I know it's the prayer of the team, that no man would leave this room without knowing he's made that commitment to start at least the mountain climb up Mount Christianity. But both have this starting commitment. Second, both climbs physically and spiritually start with both excitement and promise. But that excitement gets quickly mixed with challenge the higher you go up both mountains. Right, guys? When we climb a physical mountain, the climb first starts where I'm climbing a mountain, and you're looking up and you think how high it's going to be. And the first maybe hour, you just have nothing but exhilaration. But that begins to fade as the mountain becomes steeper, higher, more technical, and more difficult as you go up. On Mount Christianity, it's the same way. It starts sometimes exhilarating with the freedom of forgiveness in Jesus. And that forgiveness is real. Of knowing that you're a child of God. Of knowing that you have eternal life. But then as you go higher up Mount Christianity, and you guys know this, you suddenly begin to be challenged with the calls to shed bad habits. Or to die to yourself. Or to financially start giving of your income, or to serve others, or to confess your sins rather than hide them from your close friends. To lead spiritually, maybe for the first time at home. That can feel just overwhelming, as we heard just in this last message. To begin to step out and serve others, it gets harder, still stays thrilling, but it gets harder the higher you go. Third, both climbs allow you to stop at any time where you are. You can climb a mountain and you can get to a certain height physically and you go, I've seen enough. I'm ready to stop here. That's enough. I'm going to stop and go back down now. And it's the same on Mount Christianity. You can get to a place where what you've experienced, what you've seen, you go, this is good enough. And you can settle down on that side of the mountain for the rest of your life even. Or, as some do, you can decide to go back to the bottom. And then finally, both climbs will have some madness moments, especially as you get closer to the summit. Places that I mentioned that will be places of extreme challenge, places of great risk and even danger, that cry out in your mind in those moments. Again, we've heard some of these stories that have been awesome this morning. That cry out in your mind, you can stop here. This is getting too hard. This is dangerous. You're not qualified to keep going up. You need to just let it stay right here, safe, because you can't do that. These are moments that must be faced in mountain climbing. These are the moments where fearless faith and courage must be called on to move on to the higher ground, of the summit. Had a guest here. Now, on a physical mountain, it may be that you're asked to do an open-air jump, or maybe it's a white-knuckle cliff climb, or even stepping out on a sheer-faced ledge. But here's one thing I want everybody to know. When you're climbing Mount Christianity, especially as you get closer to the top, you will be asked by Jesus himself, as well as by others, to get personally involved in some way in the lives of other people. Because that is part of the mountain climb. Because at the top of Mount Christianity, whether you know it or not, at the very top of Mount Christianity, you will find it's all about investing in others rather than yourself. And it will be scary to do that. It'll feel like stepping out on a spiritual ledge when you step into the lives of other people. I mean, when you think about investing in others, it has a myriad of applications. It could be something as simple as you're sharing your faith openly with another person. It could be that you're mentoring a young man. It could be that you're leading a small group, or you were asked to lead a small group and you don't feel qualified. Or maybe you're asked to assist in leading a small group of some kind and support the person who is doing that. It could be maybe that you're going to support a friend who's struggling in sin and needs somebody to come alongside him and help shoulder the burden for a while till he can stand on his own 2 feet. It may be teaching a class or leading a spiritual discussion, just leading a spiritual discussion with your kids and sharing your heart about what Jesus is doing in your life with them. Most men have never done that. Or maybe it's leading a small group of men in a discussion group in your office or at your home or somewhere like that. All these things, listen, when you're asked for the first time to do something like that, they're going to feel like a madness moment the first time you're asked to do it. Because you're going to go, I don't think I can do that. It can feel terrifying to even share your faith because voices inside your head are saying, you don't know enough. You're not qualified to do that. What happens if you do it and you fail, or they don't want to be a part of it anymore and they quit? I mean, that first step is a sheer drop if it doesn't work. By the way, guys, we all feel this. And I sometimes wonder, with the great army of men that are out there, that so many of us have never been into battle like this, just simply because we don't think we can. But if in rejecting these fear voices and just hearing the voice of Jesus, that's what I want you to do, I'm calling you to step out and do it, and then choosing to courageously, with fearless faith, step into somebody else's life, this is where you finally summit the mountain and get on top of the mountain, because at the top of Mount Christianity is discipleship. It's just simply discipleship. We finally become what Jesus has been calling us to, even from the first day that we made that commitment and going up and wondering what it's all about and all the challenges along the way. If you go all the way to the top of Mount Christianity, it's about others and discipling them in some way with the truths that Jesus left us with. Now, to be honest, a climb up Mount Christianity is rarely a straight, uneven path or even path. It's usually a broken kind of stop and start kind of journey up the mountain. And some Christians who start the journey never finish it. Some Christian men will excuse themselves. Others will give up. Others will go up for a while and stop for a while and think it through and recommit and then go on and finish the climb. But those, by whatever path they take to go up Mount Christianity, when they finally get to the top when they finally start investing in other people. These are the men, listen, these are the men who will change this world. Those are the guys that are going to change this world, and the men and women who live in it, because there's no other way to change the world than through discipleship that passes Jesus and His Word on to others. And just a small group of pastors can't do it. It has to be an army of laymen that do it. Let me illustrate just for a moment this journey, this mountain climbing journey of men through the life of one of Jesus' men, the Apostle Peter. You know, when you look at his climb to discipleship and the journey he was on, I'm going to use 4 biblical snapshots real quickly to show you his climb up. And here's the first snapshot that we're given in the scripture. It's when Jesus was just starting his ministry. He was preaching around the Sea of Galilee in Cana. That's where Peter and other men that he called to discipleship lived. And so they're there, and they had been hearing Jesus and seeing a little bit about him. And he comes along and says directly to Peter and some others, "Follow me, and I will make you fishers of men." Peter heard that. He knew Jesus was attracting a lot of attention. He knew Jesus was probably somebody who was going to be a great revolutionary spiritually, maybe even the Messiah. And when he got that call, he dropped his nets, left his fishing job, and followed Jesus. It was a great moment. I know he heard the part, "Follow me," because he wanted to be in the in crowd. I'm not sure that Peter heard clearly the last part of the statement about being fishers of men. I mean, he was just starting the climb. But Peter would only later learn as he got higher up that Jesus was really serious about being fishers of men. And he followed Jesus around with kind of a disjointed followership, where sometimes he was right on target, other times he was betraying Jesus, even with his words of denying our Lord. But he went 3 years with Jesus, kind of apprenticing on the mountain, got through even the crucifixion and resurrection, where he had some stumbles even there. So we're going to pick up the second snapshot. It's after the resurrection. He knows Jesus is alive. And now Jesus is going to issue a follow-up to the first part of this initial call about being fishers of men in Matthew 28. And here's what it says. It says, "The 11 disciples proceeded to Galilee, to the mountain." Isn't that interesting? To Galilee, put them on a mountain above the lake that he had designated. And he said to them, "Go therefore and make disciples of all the nations, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you." Now, he had seen Jesus resurrect. He and the disciples are called to this mountain, not the beach of Galilee, and they're told to go into all the world and make disciples. We call it the Great Commission. You know what I call it? This is a madness moment. Because Jesus told these guys directly what he wanted them to do, but I can tell you, they heard what he said. But I want you to know there's something else going on, and that's how Peter felt when he heard these words. I'm just going to ad-lib a little of what Peter felt when he was hearing Jesus telling this. He's thinking, wait a minute now, Jesus is going to leave us alone? And he's going to ask us to go to all the nations of the world? Are you kidding? I mean, we're small town, Jesus. We're Galilean country boys. We're working class guys, fishermen. We don't have any formal education. We don't have any savings account or investments. There's no social standing in being a fisherman in northern Galilee. And besides, I've never even been out of Israel. I don't know anything about other cultures. You're scaring you can put something in there, out of me, hearing these words to go. And now, if I'm hearing you right, you want me to go to all the nations of the world, to step out and go into strange cities, into foreign lands, and try to convince non-Jews who I don't even like that they're supposed to follow and believe in you. Are you kidding? Really? Let me tell you, that's how Peter felt. He was overwhelmed. Just like even in Salem, and you're sitting in a church service, and one of the pastors is talking about, we need to do this in the community. We need to reach out and form alliances with non-Christians and create small groups where we're discipling and that kind of thing. And you're sitting there listening to that, and you've been going to church now for 10 years, and you're going, I don't think I could do that. That's beyond my pay grade. I don't even know where I'd start. Let me tell you, that's exactly the story of the Gospels. And that's exactly what's happening here. And the first thing is one of resistance rather than understanding the glory of what's on top. Which brings us to snapshot number 3. And snapshot number 3 is in John 21. Now this occurred, I don't know if it was weeks or months after what occurred on the mountain when they got what we call the Great Commission. But here's what it says. Jesus comes up and finds that his disciples who had heard this command had gone back to fishing. And so he sees them, and Simon Peter, it says, and Thomas called Didymus, and Nathanael of Canaan in Galilee, and the sons of Zebedee, and 2 others of Jesus' disciples, they had all gotten together down on the beach at the Sea of Galilee. And Simon Peter says to them, hey guys, I'm going fishing. And the other disciple says, well, hey, we'll come along with you. So here are 7 of the 11, there's only 11 now, of the 11 disciples, and they decide they're going to go fishing. Now, to an untrained eye, what you would see in this is that you would see Peter just saying, hey, let's go off and take a day off. Let's just go fishing. But you know what this really is? After the Great Commission, this statement is the Great Resignation. Peter's not suggesting just a little day on the lake having some fun fishing together. Here's the translation. I'm going back to the fishing business because the call of Jesus is just too much. Maybe we can disciple a few guys here in Canaan, but I can't go to all the nations of the world and work with other people and invest my life in them. No, I'm going back. And because of Peter's influence, 6 of the other disciples say, hey, we'll join you. Fishing business sounds pretty good. So here we are in John 21, and guys, here's what we have. We have a full-fledged spiritual crisis where the future of the church in many ways is on the line because the key leaders have gone AWOL. So what does Jesus do in this moment? He knows they've gone back and they've gone out on the lake that night to fish, and then we get the rest of the story here in John 21 because he comes and the dawn is about to break. They've been out fishing all night, and Jesus fixes them a breakfast on the beach and calls them to come in to see him. Okay? This is what happened. So when they had finished breakfast with Jesus, after they ate the breakfast he fed them, Jesus said to Simon Peter specifically, why? Because he's the leader. And he says to them, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? And he pointed to the fish. In other words, I called you to something spectacular on the top of the mountain that, of course, you don't feel qualified for. But I'm with you. I've got you. I'm belayed up with you. And I want you to go there. But instead, you've resigned. Do you love me, what I'm calling you to, more than this? And if you notice, Simon didn't go into an explanation about that other than just to affirm, Lord, you know I love you. But underneath, he's probably feeling, I just don't think I can do this. And Jesus then looks him in the eye and says, feed my sheep. And they'll go through this little scenario 2 more times. Do you love me? Feed my sheep. Do you love me? Feed my sheep. Because that's what I called you to do on the beach 3 years ago when I said, follow me and I'll make you fishers of men. The ultimate goal of the spiritual climb is not just for spiritual leaders like pastors or even apostles. It's for every man. I think we've forgotten this. It's for every man to climb to a place where he can learn that the top of the mountain is investing your life in some way in the lives of others, where you can encourage them to not just believe in Jesus, but to follow what he taught us to do to live the better life. So Peter, I'm calling you to invest in people. I'm calling you to disciple people. So reject your fear, strap on fearless faith, and feed my sheep. Now here's the good news. It's not told us in the rest of the chapter, but we know it from the rest of history. These men, they responded. Maybe they huddled up afterwards and says, let's just go for it. This is madness, but I'm stepping out. And they did. And they spent the rest of their lives, guys, and you know this, reaching out to and discipling others, and they changed the world. And they changed history. In fact, they changed our history. In fact, I was thinking about this morning when I was sitting in the back of the room, kind of got shivers even thinking about this. Every man in this room owes your spiritual life back to this beach. You know, they have genetic DNA and they trace your family lineage back to different places of the world and that kind of thing. If we had a spiritual DNA test, I could pick out any guy in the room and I could find that you're here, sitting here in this room because somebody shared with you Jesus and his truths and you responded. And then that guy, we would find that guy who maybe lived up in Hillsborough. He had somebody from Boise, Idaho share his faith with him and led him to Christ, and he started his journey. But then we go to Boise, Idaho, and find out that guy was discipled or at least ministered to by somebody from Tampa, Florida. And then that guy by somebody in London, England. And then that guy from somebody in Cairo, Egypt. And then that guy, and we could go back and back and back, and finally we would get to Israel, and finally we would get to the beach in Cana, where there are 7 guys thinking, I don't know if I can do this, but I'm going to step out. That's how the world spiritually changes, and if we think it'll ever change in any other way, we're fooling ourselves. Because the mountain is for all of us. And at the top of the mountain for all of us is others who need to hear from us. That's the journey. And let me ask this question. Do you think at the end of their lives, any of these men ever questioned or regretted their decision to go disciple others? With all that they experienced in the years that would come after this, do you think those experiences were any less or would be valued more than anything else they'd ever done in their life? And they would think, no, fishing would have been better. They never thought about fishing again. They didn't. And they didn't because how rewarding is it for somebody to tell you, you changed my life. Just recently, I had a young man, I was having coffee, and a young man, he was probably 28 years old, walked up to me and he said, you don't know me, but my dad was in a small group with you 25 years ago. And at the time, My mom and dad had a real rocky marriage. They were thinking about breaking up. But they got into a small group that you were a part of. And in that interaction, over those weeks he was in that small group, he found Jesus. And not only that, but his life began to change. And I was this young boy watching my dad change. And he kept changing and growing and getting stronger spiritually. And he said, you know what? It changed my life. So I just wanted to come over to the table, and he stuck out his hand, and thank you. Now let me tell you, is there anything that gets close to that as far as a reward and satisfaction in life? I wasn't even leading the small group. I was just a participant. But changed lives are the thing that carry you your whole life, and it gets richer even as the older you get. I mean, I'm about to become 73. And let me tell you, the thing I do all the time is I invest myself in others because I know that's the gift that keeps on giving, and it will keep on giving all the way into eternity. And that's what Jesus, yeah, let's clap for that. Yeah. Praise you, Lord. Because that's the way we were designed to be. And that's what Jesus calls every man into. I'm not saying he's calling you in to be full-time in ministry or to be some great teacher in front of a class or that kind of thing. Those are options. But the menu is multifaceted where you can engage people with the life of Jesus and help them grow in following Jesus. And that's called discipleship. So, let me finish up and just ask this question. Where are we today? Where are we today? I think we're probably all feeling that America is in a crisis of one kind or another. It feels heavier to me almost every day. But here's what I want you to know. What we're in is not just an economic crisis or a social crisis or a political crisis. If you read the Bible that I do, and I think you do, I think we can all agree what America's in is a spiritual crisis. We are in we're lost. We've lost our foundations. And even us as believers, sometimes I think, do I really believe discipleship is part of my calling? I see it in the Bible. Is that part of mine? Or is it something I would just rather just sweep under the rug? But we're in a spiritual crisis, and men in particular in our world are not doing well by every account. If you look at the social research, as I do, and different surveys, and just interacting in your community, you see that men are struggling. Less men are God conscious or following God in America today than ever before. Men under 40, we've talked about this several times, but men under 40, 7 of 10 young men under 40 either had no dad at home or had a dad at home that was not involved in their life, either directionally or emotionally, so he was pretty much just an absent dad on the premise. And that leaves, by any sociologist or psychologist or psychiatrist, this huge void in this young man's life. And as he leaves home and goes into a young adulthood, no matter how good he looks on the outside, he's a hollow man on the inside, desperately trying to find meaning and purpose that he will never on his own be able to fill. That's where we are in America. And so you see in those young men, skyrocketing suicides. We have 7 million young men under 40 who don't even work, yet they have the ability to work. Drug use is off the chart. Pornography is the plague of every young man. Broken homes. They don't know how to be married. In fact, most young men today don't want to be married and don't want kids. So that's where we are. It's a full-fledged crisis. And they're holding on to these goals, as even Mark mentioned, where I'm going to play games, or I want to just make a lot of money and have fun. So there we are, the next generation coming up to lead our country forward, or maybe we could say downward, because they are in desperate need of being anchored in the truth of Jesus. So how do you turn men around? And how do you turn our culture around when we're like that? I think we do what the early church did when they were living in a brutish, self-centered, dark, immoral Roman world. They went back to the same approach, or we should go back to the same approach they used and what they used, and you see it right there in the Bible. They just started personally discipling others, one-to-one, one to small groups, building into their lives, trying to call them up. And by calling them up, they are also ministering to themselves, because if you've ever led anything where you're trying to, encourage somebody spiritually, even if it's your son or daughter, you feel the pressure to step into that and live up to it because it's self-reinforcing. But having done that, here's what happens. When people do that, and we need thousands of men to start doing that. You're not going to win this community just with pastors. You're going to win it with an army of laymen who believe what I'm talking about, and they have fearless faith to step into it, to courageously reach out to our culture. So here's today's big need, in my opinion. This is the big need. We know the big problem is spiritual, but the big need is that we need spiritually courageous men who will step out of their comfort zones somewhere on the mountain and say, I'm going to invest my life in other men. I'm going to do that. We need thousands of men. If we could take this whole room and turn this whole room into an army of disciplers at all kinds of different levels, let me tell you, if nothing else happened, you would see Salem start changing. You would. Yeah. But now listen, I've been around long enough that I know when I say that, some of you are thinking, I don't know if I could do that. I don't know if I have the ability to do that. Where would I start? What exactly would I do? That's the journey to the top. Just figuring that out. But here's my question to you as I finish. After all I've said, wouldn't you at least like to try? Wouldn't you like to try something? I mean, could we set something before you that was user-friendly, that would connect you to maybe some other men where you could at least start the process? In this day that we're together, we're going to offer a number of options. I flew to Oregon to just offer one option that I know works. And it's an option I've been using around the country. We call it Better Man. It's real user-friendly. And let me put up, there it is on the screen there with a QR code. But I created a resource where men could disciple other men in a real simple way. And you go, okay, well, now how simple is it? Okay, here's how simple it is. I can tell you real quick. If you said, I want to do Better Man, what you would need to do is you would need to find another man that would join you. Jesus always sent his guys out in pairs, to encourage each other. But you just get another man and you'd say, well, let's find out what Better Man's about. Take the QR code and go there to our website. All the materials are there, all the videos, the workbooks, everything that you need. And here's the great news. All of it is free. It's been underwritten by a team of men so that we could offer all of it free. Okay, so there it is. So you would look at it and just get comfortable with what it means. And then you and your buddy would invite 4 to 6 young men on a journey into manhood in Jesus that you're going to participate in. And you just want them to meet with you where you can go through this. And when you meet, you set a time and you meet for 11 straight weeks. And what you do, here's the big responsibilities. They come in, you welcome them, give them a big hug because you've invited them into it, and then you press play on a video. And you have 35 minutes of great video teaching by a team of communicators around the country that are A1 communicators, all pro. when the video is over, you have a workbook that you've downloaded or gotten, and in the workbook, there are discussion questions off of that session, and you read the questions. That's it. Now, you go, it can't be that simple. Well, of course it's not, but that's the responsibilities. The things around it is you've invited these guys, you've set it up where you can meet, you're loving on them, and most importantly, in the discussions, you're not sharing anything but honesty with them out of your own life in relationship to the material. And it could be, some of it could be good, but some of it could be quite ugly. But these young men are going to be learning from your life and from your buddy's life how life really works up ahead through your experience, at the same time having had teaching that shows what the plan is if you want to do something better. Does that make sense? And you do that for 11 weeks together, and relationships are formed. Now, I've been doing this for 30 years, so I can say this with authority. But here's what you can expect. You can expect that for some of those men, their lives will be changed forever. And if God gives you the opportunity, somewhere, maybe 25 years from now, a young man's going to come up to you and say, hey, I just want to thank you. Because my dad was in a group 25 years ago of yours, and it wasn't going good, and your group changed his life. He gave it to Jesus, and it changed mine. Thank you. That's what's on the table. Now, there are all kinds of other resources and ways to do it, but the point is, in all of this, is you get the opportunity, just like the original disciples, to change our world forever. What do you think, guys? What do you think? Are you up for that? So let me finish with this. We're not yet on the top of Mount Christianity, but we're close. In this moment, we're close. At the top is where men have finally reached the place where they're investing in others. On the top is where people have taken serious, fearless faith steps to get there. And on the top is where we have the most unique opportunity on planet Earth, and that is turning lives to Jesus and His way of life, which is the better way of life. So guys, let me finish with this. Come on. Come on. Let's go. Let's go to the top. Pray with me. Father, thank you for the opportunity just to, well, for me, it's just pouring my heart out and trying to encourage what I think for every man in this room will be the better life. Because the better life on the top of Mount Christianity, the abundant life that Jesus talked about, is not me having more. It's me having given more and then tasting the rich fruit of what the kingdom of God is all about. Lord, would you bless these men and call them in some way in the weeks and months ahead to become what you want them to be, and that is your disciples. And we'll give you praise for that, Lord. In fact, one day we'll maybe be meeting in an eternal room and sharing stories that came out of this because men made commitments to change the world. Thank you, God, for the privilege of talking to these guys. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you, guys.